Good evening. The special session for the Madison County Board of Education for Monday, August 2nd, 2021 is called into session. First of all, I want to welcome everybody this evening. It is really nice to see a large crowd in this building again. So thank you all very much for coming out. I realize we're here for a special occasion, but it's really awesome to see the community out here again once again. So welcome. Before we begin, also you'll notice that this is not Mr. Perkins joining us this evening. Mr. Perkins is taking care of a family emergency, and I've got a letter here from him that is granting Dr. Mark Minsky, Deputy Superintendent, full authority to convene, facilitate, and make decisions in his absence on this date, August 2nd, 2021, for the board meeting. So with that, Dr. Minsky.
All right. Before we get started, also I want to make a note that Mr. Weiss and I have been in contact with Mr. Perkins today. And the recommendations that will be presented this evening are the recommendations of our superintendent, Mr. Alan Perkins. So with that being said, I recommend approval of the agenda dated August 2nd, 2021.
Motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the recommendation and approval of the agenda dated August 2nd, 2021. Any discussion? If there is none, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Second item, item B, is recognition of our Hazel Green High School softball state championship team. And I'm going to turn that over to our District 1 board member, Mr. Nathan Kerr.
Thank you, Dr. Minsky. Well, welcome. Welcome, folks. Congratulations, girls. It seems like Hazel Green is continuously back in this area on a regular basis. Last time we had something, I think our girls basketball team was here. And so it's a delight to see you guys as the softball team. We are so proud of you guys as a board. I was looking at this list, this roster, and we only have, is this correct, 5 seniors on this team? Is that correct? 5? So that means a lot of you guys will be back next year. So we're certainly proud of you. But I want to recognize, we're going to recognize all of you guys, but I want to recognize your coaching staff, Mr. Mike Henson. You hear, Mr. Henson? Mr. Ty Thompson? Miss Ty Thompson, I'm sorry, I apologize. Zachary Morrison. Zach, and Anita Bates. Hi, Miss Anita. Thank you guys for coming, and thank you guys for representing our district and as coaching staff. I also want to recognize these seniors that are here. We're going to go ahead and call them out, too. This is your last, well, I guess you all are graduated at this point. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so we're going to call you all out. Miss Madeline Crabb. Miss Paige Bertram. Miss Maddie Boyette. There you go. Miss Mackenzie Newcomb. And Miss Peyton Bell. Congratulations. We also have some. I'm going to read some stats out, some team stats that were given to me today by Dr. Hedden and Dr. Minsky. Some really, really cool stats by this softball team. Almost let it slip. Basketball. Team stat accomplishments in 2021. They scored 329 runs to the opponent's 144 runs. The team's batting average was 350. On-base percentage, 437. 55 doubles, 14 triples, 25 home runs, a 950 fielding percentage, 2 players with perfect fielding percentage, senior catcher Peyton Bell and junior outfielder Carolyn Cartron. Again, on behalf of the Madison County Board of Education, we are so proud of you. We are so thankful that you represent our community very well in academics as well as athletics. This is outstanding accomplishment. Don't take this lightly. This is a huge, huge deal for Hazel Green, for the community of Hazel Green. So we thank you. We also have a resolution that our board president will read out. We also have some awards that we're going to give to you as well. So thank you again. We appreciate you. We value you. Thank you so much, so much.
So I'm going to read the resolution that every member of the board will sign, and that certain individuals, coaches, and others will get a copy of this resolution. Whereas the Hazel Green High School Lady Trojan softball team won a hard-fought victory over a tough Springville team with a final score of 9-5. to win the state championship on May 22nd, 2021. And whereas team members Peyton Pike, Reagan Wall, Aubrey Taylor, Caroline Cartron, Mackenzie Bowling, Briley Zimmerman, Lindsay Vickers, Emma Mooney, Caroline Sticker, Mia Fowler, Madeline Crabb, Sarah Snowden, Mason Quinney, Allison Pittner, Haley McDaniel, Paige Bertram, Kaylee Hyatt, Maddie Boyette, Ashlyn Crisco, Peyton Bell, Mariah Bazil, Alexis Johnson, Sophia Hall, Erica Simmons, and Mackenzie Newcomb. And whereas the Madison County School System would like to recognize Mackenzie Newcomb as state tournament MVP and Mackenzie Bowling and Mariah Bazil as all-state tournament team. And now therefore be it resolved that the superintendent and the Madison County Board of Education congratulate the Hazel Green High School Lady Trojans softball team and their coaches, acknowledge this achievement, and express due acclamation for their outstanding accomplishments. Be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be presented to the team members, managers, Emery Claire Scroggins, and Riley Johnson, and coaches Mike Henson, Ty Thompson, Zachary Morrison, and Anita Bates, and Principal Errol Quinton Hedden, and that the words be set in perpetuity upon the minutes of the Madison County Board of Education, dated this second day of August, 2021. Congratulations, ladies. Well done and well deserved.
If we can get the Lady Trojans to come on up here in front of the board table, we're going to try to get a picture. Tim Hall, you might need a chair there, sir.
Ooh, should we just stay back here?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch.
Yeah, we'll stay here. I may have to get on a chair.
Right.
We have a stool for you, Mr.
Yeah, I know. I know. I'll just find a low spot in the crowd. It goes like that.
I realize this isn't the gymnastics team. Spot.
But it's not the basketball team either.
It's not the basketball team either.
You said go Trojans.
Send
Oh,
us.
you do better than that. 1, 2, 3.
Go Trojans.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. And you have the
You have the certificates, Nate? I'll let you go.
Okay.
Are you going to the coach? Okay, yeah. That's fine.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Coach.
Congratulations. Well done. Thank you.
Now, as we move on to the rest of the business, you are more than welcome to stay and for the rest of the board meeting. If not, you also are welcome to leave. So thank you all very much and congratulations, ladies.
Thank you.
You open that door. It said will be presented to the team members.
I think it made copies.
Yeah.
But leave that out.
Yeah.
Because you only doing those certificates.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
All right, moving into administrative items. Item A, I recommend approval of the Madison County School System Ready, Set, Forward 2021-2022 plan as submitted.
Motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the recommendation and approval of the Madison County School System Ready, Set, Forward 2021-2022 plan as submitted. Any discussion? I think before we begin, just so that everybody's on the same sheet of music here, there has been an addition to the plan. For those of you that don't know, the Alabama Department of Public Health released their back-to-school guidance this morning for 2021, 2022. We'll get into that more detail, but one of the issues or one of the things that we did need to add to the plan was the wearing of masks on school buses. So I'll let Dr. Minsky talk about that.
So that is going to be added to two different places. First will be on page 1 under the plan highlights. And I currently have that in red, and it reads, per the CDC ADPH, face masks are required for all students and staff riding or driving a school bus. And that same statement is on page 5 under the transporting student section under level 0 and level 1 COVID spread.
They are considering buses, school buses, as public transportation, just like they would a train or a bus in a city, falling under the same guidelines as the TSA. I'm not too sure how that works, but that's what they're considering buses. We do receive federal funding, so we are required to abide by the policy. So masks will be required regardless of whether we're under level 1 or level 0 or level 1 if your student rides a bus to and from school on it every day. So we just want to make sure that's all clear. Okay. Any additional discussions on the Ready Set Plan? We did get this brief to us at the last board meeting on the 24th of June, I believe is when the last board meeting was. So we had a lot of discussion on that. To my knowledge, the only other thing that we're adding here is under level 0, traditional learning with masks being optional, but highly recommended. I don't believe that the highly recommended was in the verbiage under the original plan presented last month, correct?
That is correct, sir.
Correct.
That has been added.
Okay.
I have a question under level 2. So just to clarify, so it says all the requirements of level 1 unless modified below. So does that mean, like the 4th bullet, is that an automatic thing for level 2, or is that,
What page are you on there?
She's on the second page.
yeah?
On page 2?
Yeah. This is all the requirements.
That's page.
When I was rereading it, I wasn't clear.
So everything under level 1 would, for level 2, because at level 2, we would be hybrid. Say we would have all the things in place under level 1 in addition to the things in level 2. Yes,
Requires you to do hybrid, it's not a subjective.
correct. Level 2 would be hybrid learning.
Would not the face mask required for buses also apply to level 2 if we're hybrid, meaning that kids would still be coming back and forth to school?
It's already.
Yes, it's under
it in
there.
there? I
Face
didn't-
masks are required for
Oh,
buses
that-
and
It
students
was
under
already
level 2.
part of that level
Yes.
prior to the
Yeah, I
addition
saw
of
that.
ADPH guidelines.
Yep.
I mean, and looking at I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, just to clarify, level 2 hybrid would be handled similar to how we did hybrid last year as far as which students would get the alphabet.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, so the hybrid setup would be A schedule, B schedule, first 2 days of the week. No students, all students are remote, middle of the week. And then Thursday, Friday, the other cohort of students would be there.
Okay.
So we're starting out on level 0.
We'd have to pass the plan before we did.
Okay, but that's what
level
the-
we're at.
Yeah, once we approve the plan, then we are authorizing the superintendent and his staff to determine what level we will be starting at and continuing on through. I've talked with Mr. Perkins about that, and if if he feels the need to move between levels, either classroom-wise or school-wise or cluster-wise or system-wise, that he would let me know as board president, and then I would pass that information on to the individual board members if he's moving from, say, level 0 to level 1, or level 1A to level 1B, or level 1B to level 2, something of that nature.
So if we approve this, and then it goes, the superintendent can require mask next week if he sees fit, or if there's an outbreak, or,
That is correct.
Sir.
and just to clarify, for me, I guess, what numbers are we going by? Are we going by Madison County as a whole numbers, or are we going by school numbers? What is the numbers that is going to affect this?
So we look at multiple areas. We're looking at that particular school. We're looking at any outbreaks we have among students, among staff. We're also looking at current hospital numbers. We're looking at Madison County as a whole. So that there's multiple pieces of data that are reviewed to look at those pieces. But again, as Mr. Perkins said when we presented this plan, the goal is to look at this as a smallest entity as possible, versus having things wholesale across the school system. If there's a reason that the Buckhorn family of schools needs to go to a level 1, that doesn't mean that every school in our system is going to do that. That may just be an individual classroom, it may be an individual grade level, and it may be an individual school where the other schools stay at that level 0.
But is there, the numbers of positive cases is going to drive this, correct? The number of positive cases is going to move it up in levels.
Yes.
Basically, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
That and/or quarantine. I mean, the positive numbers may be much smaller than the numbers of kids that are ended up having to be in quarantine potentially. But yeah.
And if those numbers fall back down, will the levels fall back down for a certain school?
Yes, sir.
So it's not just, okay.
Yeah, I think we moved back and forth 3 times last year between August and December, and
Something like that.
multiple classrooms moved back and forth during that time frame. So the idea was to impact as the least amount, but also maintaining the highest amount to maintain safety. So I realize you didn't come on the board until after November, but we had moved back and forth in a very similar plan last year several times. I think we started with no one at school,
Yeah.
and then
And then we
went
introduced
to
kids.
hybrid after Labor Day, and then shortly thereafter came back altogether, but with masking. And then I think we had some classrooms and some grade levels that during that time had to go hybrid or perhaps stay home in a full classroom because of the levels in that particular classroom. But in the beginning, because of the resources that we had as a community on the whole, we last year chose to stay home altogether for that first
2 or 3 weeks.
2 or 3 weeks. And I think that the state asked us to actually start later
They did.
because at the time we weren't sure where we were going with those levels. So
And last year, too, we were under a mask mandate, both within the county, at the state level. So that changed the dynamics a little bit. Government built, you were required to wear masks in government buildings. This is considered a government building. Our schools are considered government buildings. So the dynamics between last year and this year and last year's plan, the plans are really close, very similar, but the dynamic and how the masking went last year is different because we are not under a mask mandate in Madison County and we are not under a mask mandate in the state. So, things are operating just a little bit differently.
And although, excuse me, although we're not under a mask mandate, as I look at this new guidance we received from the Department of Public Health, it does set some conditions that kids will have to quarantine. Will that guidance be spread out to our staff?
We are working through that right now. Again, we had this morning, so we are working through that. I know Nurse Sadler has been working through that and kind of making sure that we have a solid plan in reference to the need to have any students that are staff that need to be quarantined.
Yeah, because as I read this, and I may be reading it incorrectly, so you guys feel free to step in, Angie, anybody, but if you are a student and you don't have a mask on, and there's a positive COVID case and you're within a certain number of feet, I think less than 6 feet, you will have to quarantine. Is that correct?
That is the guidance as we're receiving it.
And if you do have a mask, whether you're vaccinated or unvaccinated, you will not have to quarantine.
That is the guidance we receive.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So that is important for our families to know, because that may help them make a decision on whether they want to, since our masks we're not mandating it, I think it'd be critically important for our families to know that information as quickly as possible.
Yes, sir. We have a principals meeting set for 8:30 tomorrow morning, and following that meeting, we're going to hopefully have some additional guidance that we will be getting out. And pending board approval of this plan will be sent to families following that meeting.
And it looks also to me that the school district, it really kind of gets outside their hands, because the school is a mandatory reporter. So if they have a COVID case, they will have to report that. So it is not going to be the teacher, or it's not going to be the nurse. It's actually going to be the public health department that is really the people who germinate this information and call those parents, correct?
We are working through that right now.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
yeah.
okay.
I do agree with Nathan. I think that brings up a good point, that if the quarantine is somewhat based on the amount of masking that was encountered during the exposure, for our folks who participate in extracurricular activities, they may want to pay attention to that, because I think the largest impact last year that we heard about. Obviously, the largest impact was to academics, but the largest impact that parents and students had issue with was not being able to participate in their extracurriculars secondary to an exposure. So what this would mandate from the ADPH is that if you were wearing a mask, that no longer becomes part of the formula. And so your extracurricular activity is somewhat protected by that notion. Or could be, based on what the ADPH put out at like sometime today around 10 o'clock, I think. So
yes.
really,
Right.
none of us have had time to adequately review that. But I think it is important that we take a look at that and perhaps provide that information when it is solidified to especially our folks that participate in extracurricular activities, because it does give them the opportunity to avoid or to put a stronger defense against being quarantined, even though the quarantines will now come down from the ADPH and not from the school nurse.
Right, right.
To that point, too, the Alabama High School Athletic Association, and I don't know, this kind of snuck out there last week, but the Alabama High School Athletic Association has withdrawn last year. They were no longer fining teams that forfeited games due to COVID.
Yeah.
They're now going back to their original rules that says if you forfeit a game, you have to pay a fine. So to your point, you know, coaches, athletes, you know, would probably want to consider continuing to mask up or vaccinate. Many of our students that are athletes in high school are over the age of 12 to prevent yourself from being caught up in that. And yeah, that kind of snuck out there. It was a little known thing, but that kind of snuck out in the news yet last week.
I know last year some teams actually stayed remote to keep from being quarantined and some other things, but this seems like a much more viable option to be able to distance yourself from that.
How
Yeah.
do we verify that somebody masks or doesn't mask? Who's going to be the police in that?
That would be up to the person. So the way I understand it is ADPH will do the contact tracing, and they would be, that information would be provided by that person or by whomever reported it. And so you would,
Well-
but again, it's not a,
Well, my
this isn't
assumption,
a CSI investigation, is it?
my assumption with this new information that we just received is teachers will be required to have some level of seating chart, which they may already have, and they will have to somehow, somebody will have to document what students are wearing masks and what students are not. So especially in those kids that are not vaccinated, under 12, if you have a situation where there's a COVID case, that seating chart, which kids wear the mask, will have to come into play. I'll make that assumption. That's something I'm sure the district will have to work through. But,
I don't think it's on the school to.
well, I think there's a,
This, is it?
I think there will be some,
There is.
It'll
I mean,
have to
it's
be.
mandatory for
We're
us
trying to
report.
determine whether or not this is how much is on the ADPH and how much is on our school nurses.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah.
What it does say is that we're mandatory reporters, meaning if we have a COVID case, we're obligated by law to call it in. Now, what information they'll require. And they did provide a link, but if, to have the time to go through that link and
Yeah.
figure out what all would be required from today is a lot. But I think it's still an encouraging thing, or a thing that could be encouraged, that this is a possibility that you would be able to stay less quarantined with the masking available.
And I will say this, I mean, for parents that are interested, I mean, this document is on the ADPH website. I went to the ADPH website this morning as soon as I heard that it was released, and it's up there, a purple banner on the top of the ADPH website, and you can download it and look at it, so you can look at it as well. But
And it's only about
very complicated and it's very convoluted. Yeah.
But there are several links, so in order to get it all, you have to have the time to get through every single one of them.
yeah, it's a fairly comprehensive document. There are some areas that I think as teachers, they have to be aware of some new changes that
Okay.
they wouldn't have had to be aware of before. And I think it may require some seating configurations, some different things, so certainly.
I think there's some implied tasks. There's
Right.
absolutely some
Right.
implied tasks on behalf of the district, on behalf of the schools, once we digest this document. Of course, it would have been extraordinarily helpful to have had this document more than 48 hours before we go into school. You think? But nonetheless, we've got the document now, and we certainly need to dive into it and see how it applies to us. But are there any more questions concerning our plan, the Ready, Set, Forward plan?
So I've never had to vote on one of these, so I just want exact clarification. So we're voting on this to okay this plan, but we don't know what level we'll start at Wednesday.
Well, it seems to me you have to start at 0.
You got to
Yeah,
start.
you got to start at 0.
Yeah, that's why I was asking. I mean,
I'm
what
pretty
if we have an outbreak, the numbers come in tomorrow crazy?
Well, if we haven't started school, there can't be anybody to outbreak yet.
Right.
I'm talking about well, we're going by Madison County numbers as well. Like
Right.
We would
But
look
you
at
have
those
to
school
combine
numbers.
those with school
Okay.
numbers in order to make those decisions.
Vaccine, you have to take into consideration, we have a vaccine now, and the whole situation's different from last year, so.
Yeah, I think you have to start at level 0 and then work your way, hopefully not work your way, but work your way up if necessary.
Try to find that balance.
We encourage everybody to wear a mask, and there may be some benefits to it, even beyond your own health, not having to quarantine. But we're not forcing anybody to wear a mask.
Correct.
That's correct.
That is correct.
And I do want to thank, we received a lot of input, I'm sure the rest of y'all did as well, from multiple parents, teachers, both, basically for and against masking. And I just want those people to know that we do appreciate the input. We do try very hard to consider those things when we're moving forward with plans like these to try to incorporate what best supports both academics and our community. So for all of you that took time, your voice was heard. Whether or not we can, be pizza and make everybody happy with a decision, that is obviously not what we can do, but we do want everyone to know that your voice was heard. We did listen and we did consider those things as we moved forward, trying to come up with the best case scenario to keep our children safe at school, as well as in the position to have a high level of education delivered to them.
Any additional discussion or comments before we vote? If there are none, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Item B, I recommend approval of financial statements and payment of bills for June 2021 as submitted.
Motion?
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the recommendation and approval of the June 2021 financial statements and payment of bills as submitted. Any discussion, questions, or comments? Karen's here, she can answer any of those. If there are none, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Item C, I recommend approval of the contracts for services as submitted.
Motion. Second.
We practiced that
Your motion.
all day.
Okay, I'm going to give him the motion and give you the second this time.
Okay.
All right. We have a motion and a second for the recommendation and approval of contracts for services as submitted. Any discussion?
I have some discussion on the line item 10 again.
Okay. Do we need to pull that one out separately and vote on the other ones and then come back to that one?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, I'll
Recommendation.
re-recommend that. I recommend approval of the contract for services with the exclusion of item number 10 as submitted.
Motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the recommendation approval of contracts and services for line items 1 through 9 and 11 through
It's like 578.
29, I think, right? Yeah, 11 through 29. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, so we'll go back and do a recommendation for line item 10.
All right, so I recommend approval of the contract for service line item number 10 as submitted.
Motion?
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the recommendation of approval for line item 10 on the contracts for services as submitted. Any discussion? And before we go into any discussion, I just want to remind everybody that the discussion and the comments need to be solely directed towards the content of the contract, the makeup of the contract, and if we're going to discuss the individuals who is on the contract, for the good name and character, we would have to go into an executive session. So with that, go ahead, I will open up any discussions.
My question on the contract is, it is consulting training of Director of Auxiliary Services. So the contract will be for someone to come back and train someone else to do what they were doing, correct?
The contract is to consult to train the Assistant Superintendent of System Services in the job responsibilities that number 10 held.
My problem with that is, I've said this several times, but I guess I'll say it publicly now, I think it's a waste of money. Because, how long do we know before the guy retired that he was actually going to retire? Because I knew he was going to retire 2 months before he was going to retire. So did anybody in central office think to say, hey, the last 2 weeks of this guy's job, let's let him train somebody? Did we drop that ball, or why did that not take place? Because that would have saved first of all, it would have saved the last contract that was done away with. But this one's going to be for up to $7,500. We could save people money if we would have pulled him aside 2 weeks before he retired instead of what we're trying to pay him to do right now. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
So that's my huge problem with this contract. It's a waste of $7,500.
Well, but you may have to recognize it didn't happen, and so now you have to deal with the way it is, especially in light of some other things that have gone on. So I think you just have to deal with it and then try and correct the problem you're addressing.
Exactly.
Well, I think the other thing that we often look at from some of the larger places that I have worked is if you extend that person's resignation or perhaps say, okay, can you stay an extra month to train this person, or we know you're going to resign, but can you stay because that person's still functioning in that job. Sometimes you actually pay less to contract them than you would to extend their salary in order to get that same service. Now, I've not looked to see, but it's not always a waste of money. Sometimes it's just a different way to spend the same money you were going to spend in a different area because perhaps you're not paying the benefits and adding to their retirement and those sorts of things in order to limit that time frame and make it a very focused piece of what's going on.
Oh, I agree with you, and I understand that. I was just saying, I feel like I hate to point fingers at central office, but I feel like someone in central office knew he was going to retire. We could have went to him. Was that?
I don't disagree. I think that's a very
Right.
valid point, but like
But now
Sherry,
we're in
like
a
Sherry said,
situation.
the horse is left, and we can't, they can't put the cart before the horse. The barn door's gone.
But we're still going to spend $7,500 that could buy desk and books and everything else, so that's my problem.
So the contract as it is, and for the rest of the board, I'm not too sure they know. So in discussions with Mr. Perkins on this, the contract as it was drawn up is a 3-month contract for $7,500. But in that contract, there's a clause that says that every 30 days it's going to be reviewed. And if that individual's services are needed past that 30 days, we'll continue the contract. If the services are not needed, let's just say at the end of August are not needed, then the contract is null and void, and we pay out only for the time that that individual has served.
Well, I'll say this and then I'll move on, but if it's a month, so that's $2,500 a month, professional contract, right? Okay, so would one phone call allow him to get his $2,500 payment? If only one phone call is needed and one question answered, would that
Well, we're gonna-
justify and satisfy his contract?
I'm sorry, sure, go ahead.
Hopefully, we haven't set it up for that kind of a need, okay?
Well, there's no oversight.
Well, I would assume there is some oversight.
There is oversight.
There's got to be some oversight.
Mr.
Looking at the
Perkins is
contract,
oversight.
looking at the contract, there is oversight. And I think we wouldn't do a contract if we didn't have work to be done. I think I trust our leaders enough that they're going to make decisions, and we wouldn't have an individual coming back for a contract for one call. Now, I could be wrong, but I don't believe so.
I must have looked at, the old contract is what I went by, but we have a new contract written up, and it's for him to do job duties every day?
No, it's
No.
it's a consultative contract to provide training in the various areas and duties and responsibilities that were completed.
It was
Make sure that the new person, not the new person, but the assistant superintendent understands exactly how to do those and to complete those duties so that they can take on those tasks.
Okay, but it was explain to me, I guess, that it was only on a needed basis, like with a phone call. If he's needed, they would call him in. So that's not how it is now, right?
I'm pretty confident that the amount of training and time is going to be significantly more than one phone call, that it will be multiple days in which that person will be meeting with our assistant superintendent to make sure that information is passed on and logistics are taken care of.
And I think the structure of the contract now with it every 30 days reviewing will eliminate the possibility of that going into the next 60 days for that one phone call. If it looks like that individual has completed all of the end of things that he needs to do, and the person that's receiving the information is comfortable with everything that he has received, then at the end of the first 30 days, essentially the end of this month, then the contract is null and void. We pay out the initial $2,500 and then we move on.
And if for some reason he hasn't been available or he hasn't done his side of the deal, then, I mean.
I would assume that
That'll be
Mr.
the-
Perkins would take that into consideration.
All right. Is they going to do anything in writing for us? Like, instead of just word of mouth, is there going to be something that's, hey, this is how I file an insurance claim, here's my numbers? Is there something in writing? Or is it all
I'm
just?
assuming there'll be a file transfer of that information, yes, sir.
That's a good idea. It should be, because in case the next person, something catastrophic happens to him, we'll be back right where we were.
And as I said to you, Brian, I mean, I think it's a good idea that we formulate what I would call a SOP type of book, that some of the major job performances of our individuals probably need to have a continuity file, develop a continuity file, so that if, God forbid, they get deathly ill or suddenly decide to leave the system, they can pass this 3-ring binder off to somebody on their desk and say, here's everything that I've done for the last 8, 10, 12, 15, 30, 40 years, whatever the case may be.
Well, and I make some assumptions. When I see training consultation, I make an assumption that the district has thought that through. I make an assumption that somebody's taking notes and somebody's documenting. That's just an automatic for me. So it doesn't have to be in the contract specifically for me, because it is a natural thing for a training consultation process.
Applied.
Yeah.
Any other comments, questions before we go to a vote? All right. If there are none, all those in favor of approving line item number 10 on the contracted services as submitted, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed?
No.
Okay.
All right. Item D, I recommend approval of the team's contracts as submitted. And Mr. Kubik is here if you have any questions about team's contracts.
I'm just making sure Nathan's not going to motion before I
I'm pulling up.
No more motions.
do. Motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the recommendation and approval of teams' contracts as submitted. Any discussion? I read the email that Ken sent last night, and I was going to send him an email back, so I asked him this evening. And Ken, could you just, for everybody, maybe I'm the only one that had a question on this, but in case not, could you just kind of talk us through the preliminary versus the other contracts?
Yes, sir. There's 3 types of contracts. Two of them are advanced, and one of them is preliminary. The advanced is a 3-year or a 5-year, and it's based on the 3-year and the 5-year are based on the length of someone's that they've been an educator. So if they already have achieved the national board certification or the STEM certification, and if they've worked in the school system at least 20 years, then they go on to an automatic 5-year advanced, okay? If they've worked less than 20 years, then they go on a 3-year. So that takes care of advanced. They have to have their national board or their STEM certification and their experienced teacher, 20 years or more, 5-year, less than 23 years. All the others go on a preliminary. A preliminary is 1 year at a time. So everybody that's on a preliminary, if they make adequate progress towards their national board certification, we're going to be bringing these contracts back to you again next year for their next preliminary. There's only 3 out of all these that are on the advanced right now. And we have another one that may be getting their STEM certification, so that may convert, but we haven't received verification yet on that, okay? So that's the difference between preliminary. They can receive up to 3 preliminaries before they're null and void. If they don't make progress, they're not allowed to go to another preliminary. They fall out of the program as well. So there's markers that they have to meet in order for us to offer another preliminary next year.
How many of these contracts are teachers that are coming right out of college, or are there any?
We actually have on here, I think there's a total of 5 that are new to the district. Most of these that are on here are tenured teachers that we have already in our district. There's a few that are brand new to our district this year.
So does a teacher have a certain time to opt in? I mean, like, these have opted in, obviously, but what's the rules on that?
With the new teachers, anybody from this point forward that is new to, like if, let's say a science teacher leaves in the middle of the year and goes to Grissom or, Madison City or Florence or wherever, and we replace them and they want to go on to a Teams contract, we can go ahead and employ them and do a Teams contract. We're not going to open this up. We've had several meetings since June with our current employees, so our current employees are either on it now or they'll have to wait till next year. But anybody that we hire new that's coming in, that we replace a science or a mathematics teacher, we would, if they wanted to go on this and they qualified, we would go ahead and allow them.
It's a great program. It's a good thing that the legislature did to pass this. I think it's going to be a good thing for the system and good thing for our schools in general. So, all right.
What causes a salary gap in a lot of them? Because there's like a $30,000 salary gap in a few of them, right?
The larger ones are right around the 18,000. And remember, when you're looking at the salary matrix of a Teams contract, it's comparing it to the state of Alabama matrix. You as a board pay greater than that. So it's not as great of a band as they portray it here. It's less. Like for instance, with our experienced teachers, you add 3,500 on top right there. So that comes off of that band in between there. So ours, where it might be 18,000 at the high end, ours might be closer to around 15,000 difference. But this is a matrix that the legislators came up with, and they're the ones that created it. It pretty much is determined on years of experience and degrees. You move up and the band gets larger and larger, the greater your degree is and the more experience that you have.
But you give up tenure. You give up some stuff, too.
Correct. And the tenure piece, it's very, very specific as to how they have the return right in tenure. They have to be making adequate progress, and they have to basically not get the certification. Just because you're making progress doesn't mean that the national board's going to award you the national board certification. So the only time you get this return right is if you don't make the progress. If you decide that you just want out, there isn't a guaranteed return right there. So it's very, very specific on the tenure piece that's in there. And that's one of the big pieces that AEA was fighting, was because of the tenure piece. And the other piece that's really important out of this is that you're no longer a Hazel Green, Buckhorn, Sparkman High teacher. You are an itinerant teacher at the district. So if for some reason we need to move you to where right now, if we want to move someone, we have to go through the board and you do a transfer or a reassignment. Well, and this, if they need to be moved to a school where there's a greater need, they can be moved at any point during the year without any kind of due process rights to the board to be. So they basically become itinerant instead of a Hazel Green High School or Sparkman High School math or science teacher. And that's been another thing that's caused a few of them to kind of reconsider whether they want to do it, because they really, really loved what they were doing at their school and they didn't want to take that chance. Not that we're planning on moving anybody. That's not what, but they need to know that that is a possibility. It could occur. So there's a lot to it. It's not as cut and dry as people think that, I'm a math and science teacher and I'm going to be able to make an extra $18,000. Yes, but there's some provisions there. They also have to teach in their content area all day long, full-time. So like a coach that has an athletic period where one of their periods is, working with their sports team, they're knocked out of the teams. They can't do it. So that's another thing that has to be verified. Mr. Solly's office verifies their schedules to ensure that they're teaching the content area. One teacher had a career prep class. Well, the career prep class does not qualify in the science or math, so it kicked them out of the teams. So there's some ownership there also at the school, making sure that the teachers are teaching exactly what they're supposed to be teaching. And all these contracts, once they're signed, have to go to the state for approval as well. And we think we really don't know what that looks like yet. What we're asking you to do is to offer these people who've showed interest a contract. I'm gonna meet with them individually, go over the whole contract. If they sign off on it, then we'll forward those to the state.
Sounds good. Thank you, Ken. Appreciate it. Any additional questions? If there are none, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Item E, I recommend approval of the personnel items as submitted.
Motion?
Second.
I have a motion, I have a recommendation for, I haven't heard Brian say a second or motion in a while, so that's took me off guard. I have a motion and a second for the recommendation of approval of personnel items as submitted. All right, there we go. Any discussion? Angie, thanks for your email back to Ken. Ken, I think you all done a wonderful job on trying to fill these slots. I think the numbers were, there was 300, and we've got 14 open positions. Is that what the email said? So I think that's an outstanding job on your behalf and on your team's behalf to be looking and recruiting and getting quality people in to fill these positions. So thank you very much for the hard work.
Staff did a great job and also.
They did. Everyone did a super good job. So, any other questions or comments? If there are none, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Item F, I recommend approval of the Monrovia Middle School principal contract as submitted.
Motion?
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the recommendation and approval of the Monrovia Middle School principal contract as submitted. Any questions, any discussion? If there are none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Do you want to congratulate Mr. Keith Trawick, who will be transitioning from our Supervisor of Student Services over to the principal position at Monrovia Middle School. And item G, I recommend approval of the supplemental contracts and the discontinuation contracts as submitted.
Motion?
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the recommendation and approval of supplemental contracts and discontinued contracts as submitted. Any questions or comments? If there are none, all those in favor, say aye.
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 All right. That completes the agenda for the evening. I'll open it up to the floor for any board member that would like to say anything good for the board. Any comments as we get ready to head back into the new school year? It's exciting, always exciting to start up the school year. I've talked with several principals today from my district. Chris Shaw being one of them, said he had a real good turnout this morning. Sherry said he saw you there with your daughter. Talked with one of my elementary school principals and middle school principal, and they're all very, very excited for the start of the school year. And I think we're all very excited to begin the school year off on the right foot. So cross our fingers. Any other comments before I entertain a motion to adjourn? All right. If there's no other comments, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Thank you all. Good night. Appreciate it.